Hello, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the panel, the weekly show of UMD Media. Today we'll be covering myth versus reality, Ethiopia's priorities and factual reports. That's the topic of the week, and we'll be going into details into that topic shortly. But first, we'll start with the first segment as usual, the what stood out for each of the panelists. I'm delightfully joined by Dr. Bridge, Faisal Robla, and Iskel Kapisa. Welcome back, gentlemen. Great to have you again. So let's start with the highlight of the week. A lot of highlights, I know, but to have enough time for our main topic, we'll make it short. So, Duke, you want to start with what stood out for you?
Sure. Well, I think what stood out for me mostly was the food distribution numbers coming in a little bit lower than they had been, than they were expected to. Right now, the past 6 weeks, Tigray has only gotten about 2 million rations of food distributed. Now that's right at the point of how many people are at stage 4 and 5 of food insecurity. So it's at the point now that we know that people are not getting food who absolutely need it. Now there's no way to tell how bad it is right now in Tigray because they have not done another food assessment, another food security assessment, or another nutrition assessment that's been published at least. But the food security assessment, the emergency food security assessment, has been requested since January of this year by the food security cluster and hasn't been performed. This is a very disturbing trend that they're just not, it doesn't seem like they're looking to see what the impact is of the additional food that's been released. There's also a problem with not knowing if the food is getting to IDPs, and that's not just in Tigray, but that's also in Oromia, Somali, other places where there are large numbers of IDPs who were known as of last September to be starving. But another assessment has not been conducted, it doesn't appear, to see what their conditions are now. This sort of hands-off data policy that they're doing right now, where they're just leaving everything to sort of chance, is going to be having very horrible consequences for people who are reliant on food assistance and cannot, for the moment, get food anywhere else. So that's sort of been what I've been tracking in the past week. Thanks.
I apologize. I have this stubborn mouse hindering me. Thank you, Duke, for that. Faisal, what about you? What's the highlight of the week? I guess you are muted. You are not muted, but I can't hear you. Is it only me?
I can't
Hear
hear
me?
me. There you go.
Now you can. Yeah, you are back.
Yes. So I cannot miss the opportunity to comment on President Ruto's high-profile feasibility and reception in Washington D.C. And I'm writing a brief analysis for Wardair News between now and tomorrow. But what really did strike me is the debate between whether the United States of America is trying to enhance the securitization of the need of Africa versus economic development, industrialization. As we know, at the turn of 1960, and this week we are Africa's, celebration day, May 25th, Ghana and South Korea were more or less twin in terms of their level of development. I think Ghana had a little edge in terms of GDP and what have you. That's 1960. When you look at it today, Korea's per capita income is about $30,000, whereas Ghana is $1,600, and Kenya is probably around that less. And then the question is, what happened? I think this is where we need to really look at the promises made to Kenya, and what does this big celebration mean to the rest of Africa? Is it going to play out the same way it did play it in the 1970s when McNamara was the head of the World Bank, where they just overlooked Africa's needs, except to play one power against another, whereas in the newly industrialized countries, the NICs, they really made an effort to demonstrate and showcase how the West can help developing countries such as Korea. The result today, the demonstration worked for the next country, the newly industrialized countries such as Singapore and Korea and what have you, and Taiwan, whereas in Africa, throughout the 70s, we were experimenters of small scale type, methods of development. So I think the president of Kenya talked about changing the financial arrangements that Africa has with the West. And the model that World Bank is now working with Africa is not really one that pushes Africa through industrialization, but just to keep financing its debt from one day to another, whereas the other regions have shown significant development because the United States and the West followed a deliberate pro-industrialization policies. There is a school of thought that says this demonstration was just meant to showcase that socialism doesn't work, whereas capitalism works. But in Africa, if you look at those that have followed the path to socialist development, such as Tanzania and what have you, versus those that really gave their soul to the West, such as Kenya, Ivory Coast, both of them are in the same pocket today. They are in the same bucket. They have not developed. So the question I'm raising is the West this time serious to really help Africa develop and move forward with its, youthful population that is searching for opportunities, or it would go back to its, roadmap, which now Africa would again be securitized, and security and militarism would be more important than other, because we talked a lot about modernizing Kenya's weaponry system. And the last thing Africa needs, particularly the Horn of Africa, is more weapons, because the weapons, according to Ali Mazrou, we don't go out to conquer Europe or somewhere else. We just kill each other or start a war with another country that's neighbor. So I'm a bit optimistic. However, I'm raising these questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Faisal, for that. Still, thank you for making this happen. I know you just flew in to join us. I really appreciate that. So what's the highlight for you?
Yeah, I did not want to miss you guys, so no need to for gratitude. The highlight for me is basically the title that we're discussing today, the myth and reality. And I just wanted to start by highlighting that myth and reality, trying to juxtapose and try to understand what's going on in the Ethiopian media. Not that inaccurate reporting is new, but the level of outright lies has become a little bit more present than other times and bizarre. About a month ago, the government office, press office, the communication office, as it's called in Ethiopia, instructed Ethiopian media to report that the Ethiopian army had destroyed the insurgencies in Oromia and Amhara regions. That is a time when the war was raging in both places, but the instruction simply went out to report something that actually did not happen on the ground. Then army generals and governors of the two regions, or officials at different levels of the regions, they also came out, started to talk about the complete destruction of the two insurgent groups. This time, they were not talking in terms of we have degraded it, we have reduced it, we have chased it to the highlands or the forest. This is simply talking about the complete destruction of these two insurgencies, and that was really different. And the people that we're talking about from the military side were not like low-level spokespersons, but lieutenant generals and commanders of the different regions, the different commands of the Ethiopian National Defense Forces. Lieutenant General Maseret, I think that's his name, Maseret Kagenu, is the commander of the Western Command. And he was in Horoguduru, where he announced that they have completely completely annihilated the OLA in that region, and Horogudru is now free. Lieutenant General Burhanu Bakkala is the commander of the Northwestern Command. He too, in Gondar, came out and talked about how the army had completely annihilated the Amhara insurgencies, the different Fano groups. So, Lieutenant General Mohammed Tassema is the commander of the Eastern Command, but he is now assigned to deal with the insurgency in Gojam, and that's where he is from. Debre Marcos, it says exactly the same thing. And Lieutenant General Shuma Abdetta is the commander of the Commando Division and Special Forces Division, and the central Addis Ababa area commander also came out, and Debre Birhan saying exactly the same thing. And regional government officials, including the president of the Amhara region and others under him, also came out simply announcing the demise of the insurgents in their respective regions. But the reality on the ground is, and this is the reality, the myth is the myth, the reality on the ground could not be more different. In the Amhara region, just about a week ago or so, the 51st Division of the Ethiopian National Defense Forces disappeared, including its commander, a lieutenant colonel whose name I don't remember right now. Nothing is known about what happened to that unit. It's suspected that it had apparently joined the Amhara insurgency in that region. In the Amhara region, roads are periodically closed, on and off, mostly off, to prevent Amhara insurgents from making movements and move logistics from place to place. So trade and commerce and communications in that area is disrupted because of wars on and off in many places, conflicts in many places in the Amhara region. Now, major cities in the Amhara region are under government control, but bombs explode in those cities. Politicians are assassinated, and the police stations are looted regularly in the Amhara region, that is. In Oromia, there is intensified war in many places, including in the Horogudru region, that is the northwest from Addis Ababa, and again northwest of the West Shawa zones. But these conflicts are really raging in these two places, in Horogudru and West Shawa zones. And I just wanted to highlight something to show indicators of what's really going on in Oromia. Now, the Oromo Liberation Army engaged the ENDF forces a little more than a week ago in a place called Amaya. It's about 112 kilometers southwest of the capital. There, after the engagement, they routed the ENDF forces. They captured they killed the brother of the Air Force commander, the Ethiopian Air Force commander, and captured two brothers and some of other relatives, and they are parading them on the media this week. These are brothers of the Ethiopian Air Force commander. Of course, in retaliation, he also sent special forces from the Air Force and captured the relatives of the commander who led the operation. Mr. Shimelis Ardisa, the Oromia regional president, his father was captured. He paid 1 million in ammunition, 1 million pieces of ammunition to the captors of his father to get his father released. His mother was also captured, even while she was being protected by 30 bodyguards, and she was abducted. And for her, the Shimelis paid 10 million to have his mother released, and also fulfill the demand of releasing 3 other mothers in the Guji region. There are some bizarre stories there too. A retired general was tasked to lure an OLA commander from the central region, the central command zone, to defect to the government while the commander of the OLA, the overall commander, was outside of the country. This OLA commander asked for 200 million birr, and the retired general, I don't want to mention his name here, but I know who he is. He delivered 200 million birr in sacks to the OLA commander. He took the money and he told him to go home with the 200 million birr. There is more to it, but we don't have time to go into that. Now, at the same time, a drone valued at $5 million by Raptor TB2, that Turkish-made drone, whose MAML bombs cost about between $60,000 and $100,000, was sent to kill one commander, one OLA commander in the Boroguru region. It fell out of the sky and was destroyed before it got to the target. This surprised me. Why the Ethiopian government that has announced that they have annihilated it, that they would send 60 to 100,000 a bomb valued at that level to kill one commander. And of course, the Oromia police issued a report this week which revealed that in the last, and this is the government's report, I'm not adding to it, I'm not embellishing it, that in the last 9 months, 4,867 members of the various police units were lost. Of these, 3,029 were members of the regular police force, 1,047 were special operation forces, and 147 were VIP protection unit members. They all defected to Ola, and 647 were killed in 20 zones and 126 districts in Oromia. So far, I probably said this last week, there were about 80,000. The Oromia police force, the various units, was an 80,000 strong police force. Now only 48,000 remain in the force. The remaining 32,000 have either been killed or joined Ola. Now, so the myth is the myth. The reality on the ground is what I just reported. It's not refutable. It's true, ironclad. It's just amazes me these days that the generals, high-ranking general, lieutenant generals, 3-star generals, commanders, lie in broad daylight that the war is going their way when this could simply be verified. The Ethiopian Prime Minister is going around the country these days and peddling his lies about planting 32 billion seedlings. And this week is what I'm talking about. He announced that Ethiopia achieved food self-sufficiency, contradicting his own government's report that millions of people are needing food assistance. So I'm just baffled by the myth and reality. I suspect this is probably the way Prosperity Party behaves, peddling prosperity gospel, that if you speak it and claim it, it will happen. It might be the case in the other world, but in this world in which we live in, this hasn't happened yet. So that is the juxtaposition of the myth and reality for this week, Getachew.
Great. I think that's you already started the topic, and we will continue and build on that. To just clear for our viewers, what triggered this topic is not only one incident, but if you go back to June 27, 2018, I don't know if people remember that specific day, but they would remember this video where the state media, where the Prime Minister came in and said, starting tomorrow, Ethiopia will start producing, at least at the trial stage, producing oil. This was the video.
ለው የፖሊ ጂሲኤል የተሰኘው የቻይና ኩባንያ ላለፉት ጥቂት ዓመታት በተለያዩ የሀገሪቱ ከባቢዎች ላይ በድፍድፍ ጋዝን
Basically, for our English viewers, this came as a breaking news actually on the state media on prime time. Breaking news: Ethiopia will start producing, oil starting tomorrow. of course, everybody knows these were nowhere to be found after that, and there were a number of these kind of claims. But what the immediate background to today's topic is this, which is now removed from state media channels, but thanks to the Standard, which captured it on its platform. What Professor Tker was alluding to, we have successfully attained food self-sufficiency, and he even said, maybe starting next year, we might say to those who would come with aid and stuff to Ethiopia, thank you, but no thank you. So this is what he said this week.
ያው እንደሚታወቀው በምግብ ዋስትና ለመቻል የምናደርገው ጥረት የተሳካ ስራ ነው። ብዙም ማናስጨው ያን የማይፈልጉ ኃይሎች በተለያየ መንገድ እንዳይቆነጥጡን ፈርተን ካሁን በቀር በምግብ ራስ መቻል ኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ አሳክተናል። በሚቀጥሉ ጥቂት ዓመታት ቢበዛ በሚቀጥለው ዓመት ጀምሮ ከውጭ የሚገቡ እርዳታዎች እናመሰግናለን የምንልበትን ጊዜ በጣም እናቀርበዋለን።
So this Standard is saying just in the last month, Ethiopia was in Geneva to ask actually for money from different donors, and we have a number of reports from the UN, including students out of school and so on. So Faisal, why don't you get us started here? I mean, given what we know over the past 6 years, including this self-sufficiency PR from the Prime Minister.
Yeah, thank you. I think, it's very difficult to chase Prime Minister Abiy's myth, and I don't want to call it lies, but just misrepresentation of facts here and there. I think from the day his government started to change the Ethiopian currency, to devalue the Ethiopian currency and change from 21 to the dollar in 1920, January 1920, around that time, in preparation for the Tigray War, in my opinion, the economy has been sliding very rapidly downward. I think you're right, 21.4 million people in need of food, 15 million of them in a critical need. Not to mention that of the $3.2 billion that the government asked for, about $400 million are being granted by international donors. So here you have the Prime Minister asking for food donation in the world, and on the other hand, he's saying that Ethiopia has reached self-sufficiency in terms of food. What we know is no more than 50% of Ethiopia's arable land that produced grain for the country is now under cultivation. Whether the issue is because of lack of fertilizers, the war is, Oromia is the largest region with the largest cultivated land, and I think the estimate is about less than 70%. The Bali region that he talked about in terms of demonstration for his success in order to create what we call myth, I think with the exception of several districts, most of Bali's regions are also in flux in terms of conflict, and also the area that is subject to Al-Shabaab really entering. You probably heard also other reports where the government is slashed, even it is subsidy to college students, and now it's running and giving 20 birr per day per student, which really can only buy a cup of tea and probably less than a loaf of bread for one meal. So, that is really the level. I think the international level of extreme poverty is about $50 per person per day. We're talking about people who live off the trash of Cairo and Alexandria and Philippines who don't have anything. That estimate really applies to them, the extreme poverty. Now you're talking Ethiopia's elite class. University students are supposed to be elite class, subsisting on less than that. Not to mention the fact that I think the finance minister, Ahmed Shide, admittedly reported to the Ethiopian legislators that his budget can no longer sustain the government's needs. Several districts in the southern regions of the country have declared that they failed to pay salaries to their teachers and to some other government functions. The latest thing that really contradicts, and I think Skiel put it very aptly in terms of what the war costing to the people of Ethiopia in the country, is the fact that the youth is no longer looking at schools. I think UNICEF just reported that 1 in every 3 child has no access to school. They can go if they can go, but they have no access to school either because there are no schools. About 6,000 schools are destroyed. And I think the fact that the war is preventing them from going to where even it's available, children are being, prevented from going to school. Lastly, I think the worry that the world is showing about Ethiopia, and I think I can come back to that, is 3 fronts, I would say. One is the economic collapse, potential economic collapse, which the numbers that we are just discussing is really an indication of a near economic collapse, and just the siren hasn't, blow off yet. The second is the description of the damage and depth of the war in 2 major regions in the country, with the American embassy just registering his worries and the lack of prospect for peace and talks. And then the third is the fact that the youth have seen in the last few weeks the possibility of conscription. The government has called for a potential conscription. I think it started in Addis already. And I am getting the reports from the Somali region that the youth are deserting Jigjiga and Gode and Dagahpur and other places. Whether that would again, add to the firepower of Al-Shabaab, which has been really in the last few weeks, getting momentum in the last few months because of the MOU. As I heard from official government reports from Somalia, Al-Shabaab has increased its membership since the MOU with Somaliland, Ethiopia signed, is to the tune of 8,000 members. This is how Somalia tracked. And now with the conscription, kids either will jump into the oceans to try to cross to Europe and other places where they can get safety, or they may join the rebel groups such as Ola and Amara Fana, and even some, moderate religious groups will see the possibility of whether they should fight for Ethiopia in areas that they don't know or join Al-Shabaab. So I think both militaristically, economically, duress that if something is not done in the feasible weeks and months, I think we are looking at a country that may have a different picture in the coming few years.
Thank you, Faisal, on that. I mean, specifically within the food security domain, Duki, you have been reporting consistently about Tigray, but now about Oromia and Amhara as well. And what clicked, in you in terms of when he saw the Prime Minister just now? I mean, he's not saying in a closed meeting. He was saying it from a field to media, and it was on the state media and everywhere else. But then I think for whatever reason he had to remove it today. So what did you say?
Well, first, it's a little weird because I think during the public availability or public speech, whatever, he said he wasn't going to make it public because the enemies who don't want to see it happen will find out and stop it from happening or something. So that was a weird thing to see during a public statement, that he wasn't going to make it public. The second thing is that this is like the 8-month anniversary of the last time he said that they were going to have a surplus of food and they were going to sell it to Kenya, I believe. But the data that he came up with, the idea that Ethiopia is self-sufficient as far as food goes. I wish that were true. But if you just look at what happened in the past 3 months, or in the first 3 months of the year, we only have data up until March. But in March, there was still about 90,000 people in Oromia who were receiving, this is just that one region, just the region he was in, that were receiving nutritional support for malnutrition, acute malnutrition, severe malnutrition, or for pregnant and lactating women. These are just children under 5 and pregnant and lactating women. About 90,000 in March received support for that. If you look at that and you take Oromia, Somali, and just Tigray, just those 3 regions, and you look at how much nutritional support and how much food assistance they've been given, then the number's at about 4 million. About 4 million people have gotten food and nutritional support. That contradicts this idea of self-sufficiency that he's been saying for quite a while now. But the real danger there, I mean, one, the danger is that obviously nobody's really thinking hard about what to do about it in the Ethiopian government if they're still clinging to this narrative that everything's okay as far as agriculture. But the other thing is that we're only at about 2.5% of the funding that we need for the food response in Ethiopia. As Faisal was saying, how is that going to help raise the money needed to keep the people who are right now in displacement camps, or had their crops wiped out by drought, or had their farmland stolen by conflict, by conflicting parties? How are they supposed to eat for that time? Nobody thinks about. I mean, this is something that other administrations had done in Ethiopia previously, where people are starving, and you just tell as many lies as you can to try to keep the pressure off. But that doesn't work on the ground. You cannot BS what's happening on the ground. And I think it's a very dangerous game that he's playing. What surprises me is that they took it down, is that they took the thing down, because 8 months ago he was fine saying it and people were still starving. I mean, if you'll recall back in 2021, when we found out that there were 500,000 people starving in Tigray at stage 5, he said there's no hunger in Tigray. I mean, that is the prosperity gospel in a nutshell, is that, you just have to believe it. You just have to keep your mind focused on it, it'll come true. But there's people are starving right now. Children are not developing the way they should. People are more vulnerable to diseases. There's still cholera. There's still a great fear that the cholera epidemic is going to blow out of proportion. When you get that, and you're looking at malnutrition, people who are weaker than they should be because they don't have the food that they should have, and you add cholera to that, or you add conflict to that, or displacement, or floods, or anything, that becomes a force multiplier for people to not survive or to develop lifelong health problems that they will never shake, that they will always have to deal with. And that's what suffers. Those are the people who suffer from these lies. And this is, and it is just, it's unbelievable that this is something that's happening while they're asking for money, while they're asking for humanitarian aid. Abiy will not stop spreading this myth that they have all the food that they need, because it's just, it's ridiculous, and it hurts the people who need it the most. It doesn't hurt Abiy very much right now, but it hurts the people who need it the most. And that's a very sad thing.
Thank you, Doc, for that. Still, I want you to continue with where you started in terms of reality check on a number of items. One of the things that we learned, I think, again, through our standard report is the how the government expenditure versus income. Over 8 months, there is a significant gap that they were reporting to the parliament in terms of fiscal strain and so on. But also we know universities unable to feed students, a number of cases of this, and salaries unpaid for over a year for a number of regions and so on. So again, build on what you started on reality and myth.
Yeah, This is not a dig, Faisal. I understand niceties, diplomatic niceties. They're really nice. We can call misrepresentation, representation. But what we mean is basically they're lying. That's what we're saying, but in a very different form. I think there is a philosopher at Yale named Harry Frankfurt. If you can show the book, this is about truth and lies, and he says the worst enemy of truth is not a lie; it's BS. Is what he's saying, that because the liar, yeah. That's a book in which, Harry Frankfurt says that the biggest enemy is the BS, not even lying, because the liar knows he is lying. So he inserts the lie strategically, not simply outright lie. They don't do that. Now, in Ethiopia, in the last 5 years, Ethiopia has lost it on many of the indicators, and I have a report that I just read this week. If you look at that report, inside that report, 2024 report, the governance index for Ethiopia is number 88 out of 137 countries. Economic transformation is 110 out of 137. The status index is about 110 out of 137 countries that were surveyed. Political transformation, look at it, it's 96 out of 36. This is not a good picture where I could say, oh, they're misrepresenting. This is not. It's absolutely not. They're misrepresenting. It's true. It's inaccurate. But I think they are simply lying to the Ethiopian people. In fact, betraying the trust that was bestowed upon them. This is not good for Ethiopia. This will not be very nice for governance in any country, for that matter. Because if we don't share a public sphere where we actually agree on some substantive issues, we can't even have a conversation. We can't even have a conversation. We cannot have a solution for our country. If this is the way we talk to each other, if our government is simply telling us totally inaccurate information knowingly. I'm sure they understand that Ethiopia since 2019 had exported about 1.6 million tons of wheat at the cost of $700 million. They know that from 2019 to 2023. They know that. This is their government's report. Why is the Ethiopian government prime minister coming out and saying that we're exporting wheat? Why is he saying that? Why is he saying that when this country, Ethiopia received about 300 tons of wheat from Ukraine, negotiated by the World Food Program and delivered to Ethiopia. And what did they do with that? They took it to the mills and ground it, and then they're exporting it. I mean, this is the BS that Harry Frankfurt is talking about. This is not good for the country. This absolutely is not good for the country that we want to be stabilized. We don't have a sphere, a space, a political space where we can say 2 + 2 is 4. So, yeah, while I understand the nicety in this case, but this is what it is. And the myth and reality, the gap between the two is so wide that I cannot use any other term than saying when it is really in broad daylight. It's just in broad daylight. We know this. So this is not governing. That's the reason that I say that. Now, look, the HDI, which we just saw, is Ethiopia is now at 176 out of 182. Is that prosperity? This is prosperity. You are at the bottom. 182 and the HDI index is at 176. Mass death in Ethiopia today, Ethiopia was 5th in 2018. Today it is 32nd in mass death, avoidable death. Is that prosperity? Ethiopia is leading the world in terms of internally displaced people, about 10 million now, pushing to 10 million. Why is the government denying that they do not exist? Human beings that need our compassion and our help and the compassion of the rest of the world. We remember the Haile Selassie period where they denied the drought in Wallo and 1 million people died. So denying these do not exist, about 10 million do not exist, is killing, tantamount to killing them if they don't exist and receive food aid. We know all of this. We know that the budget increased by 90% under the Prosperity Party. Is that what we want? That's prosperity? And of course, the arm industry, they're very happy to export to Ethiopia. The drones I just talked about. By the way, the drone operators, from what I heard, were taken into custody for driving it into the ground in Horogudru. So that's the point that I was trying to make by saying that, like, the budget in Ethiopia, about 70% in 2018, 70% of the annual budget of the Ethiopian federal government went to pro-poor projects. That has fallen down to 33%. Why are they telling we don't know numbers? We really don't know numbers? Numbers lie? 32 billion seedlings, and it's been peddling this around the world. Everybody ignored it. Everybody ignored it because it is unseemly. It doesn't look like it is possible. You can't. Some people made some calculations. In the Amazon, there are about 329 billion trees in the Amazon, in the entire forest area. If you have 32 billion seedlings that you have planted, and assuming that they grew, that would be half of the landmass of Ethiopia. It cannot happen. If you put the seedlings on top of each other, it would go to the moon. That cannot happen. So this is the problem that we have, that we don't recognize our problem. It amounts to killing human beings when you deny that people are starving. The government is deliberately causing the death of our compatriots. So the myth and the reality is everywhere. And now, as I said, it's so brazen these days. It's so bizarre that I can't even fathom why they're doing what they're doing. I don't know why they're really lying. I don't understand this, and I'm baffled by it.
Faisal, you'll continue.
No.
And
I
think
just,
there is one,
yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, so there is one question people understandably would ask. Why is the government doing this? I mean, whatever we call it. But also, who is the target audience? And what is it? I mean, in terms of performance, is the government succeeding in choosing this pathway? Faisal?
Yeah, I think enough documentation has been made that the myth exists within Abiy's circle. The reality is highly documented internationally, regionally, what have you. I think numbers are everywhere. OCHA, as Duke probably is apt, updates its drought and famine and hunger and food issue both monthly and quarterly. So I think the world knows. The world knows that 1 million people or close to that died in Ethiopia's war with Tigray. But I think the school of thought of Abiy always claimed that TPLF and was destroyed, and if we have to negotiate with somebody, we can't even find. I mean, it's no longer. It's not in economics. It's not in. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. That's why I said when I caveated, chasing Abiy is yes, the way I put it. Misrepresentation is, but definitely you can say lies. Is all over. I think this started the moment he took power, from plagiarism to, claims that are not substantive. We know it. People who read know it. People who listen know it. the international world and those who make decisions at the international arena know more than us. One of the most sophisticated reports, economics as well as cultural data, is produced not by World Bank but by the CIA. Tons of people like Walter Russo, who was a known economist, started their career with the CIA, not with World Bank. So there is plenty of information that the world has that what he is saying is not really the truth, but this is the myth that he feeds to people who are nowadays, really defied any decency. One Al-Mariam who just, throws insults on America and everybody who is feeding those poor people that we are talking about is one of his closest advisors. And I know the man, he was just one of the worst writers that I've ever met at the Ethiopian Review, those days. And his advisor, who recently said that what's wrong with Ethiopia if 10 million people died? 15 million are now under the threat of famine-like conditions. And this man, who is the prime minister advisor, said, with the current situation that Ethiopia is, if 10 million people disappear, we still have 100 million left. Now, I mean, how serious Ethiopia's situation is? Out of quote, supposedly 100 million, 25 million people are starving. That's close to 20% of the. There is no country that is called normal country where 20% of its people are under starvation. Ethiopia is that. So I think, I mean, if we dig deeper and deeper, it will become, as I said earlier, searching Abiy's myth, and as to my friend is up toward lies. Of course, that would be searching, and we will never catch that because, we have seen in the last 6 years, we can never really pin him down to the reality, but he will search and go with his myth. I watched exactly this Getachew the very day that they posted, where he said we are self-sufficient, and I called Jigjiga. And by the way, the areas that were designated as wheat producing countries where my father comes from, and somebody told me that 20% of the land, arable land in that area, is not even cultivated, even 20%. On top of that, this year, rain conditions were worse than what they were last year. And the level of even edgy type feeling is even in towns like Jijiga, in terms of starvation, people who never knew what starvation was, in cities, in districts, in medium level cities, at least in the Somali region, where I'm getting information, are really feeling the pressure of lack of food. It is no longer confined to rural areas. It's no longer confined to areas where conflict is raging, such as Oromia. Jigjiga and 20 miles outside Jigjiga, people are feeling the looming largeness of famine. So I think where can we go from here? I think the United States and EU should really pay more attention to this issue and not, as Escal probably alluded to, babysit lies when they know the reality. I think it's about time to ask what to be done in order to save the people of Ethiopia, and what are the best course to really not listen to this music of the myth that started with Abiy coming and preaching his sermon from the day he took the office. He got audience right away through his ecumenical messages, and he still holds some of that audience either in the West. I am told that the State Department is no longer his audience except one high-ranking officer. I think if that person probably changes attitude toward the Prime Minister, things could change. We are in a position where I think the West should need is to look at alternative models of saving Ethiopia and not listen to the music that is full of myth as opposed to the reality that they know.
I'm still struggling. Okay. Can you come back on the question of, I don't think, Faisal, you might come back later on. Why is he doing it and who is his audience? Can you reflect on that? And also, is he encouraged by the fact that it's working for him? Scale.
I mean, for me, and I've said this on many occasions, that he himself doesn't know that he's doing what he's doing. He thinks that it's right because of his personality. Pathological liars don't know that they're lying. That's why it's pathological. They don't know that they're lying. As I said earlier, a liar knows that he or she is lying, so they insert it strategically. Because of his experience and his fear that he would lose power, he would do anything, and that's what he did. He would do anything. He would say anything to keep power. Nothing matters to the Ethiopian Prime Minister today. Death doesn't matter. If people died, he will tell you what's new about it. In America, in Los Angeles, people die, 600 of them every day. What's new about it? What's new in Ethiopia? That we've been dying forever. What are you talking about? Is what he's saying to you. If you're saying that women were raped in a war, he would say, what's so new about that? That was the genitalia of a man. Did I make that up? He says that. He doesn't have conscience about this. He cannot reflect. He just doesn't know. You know the story of a frog? A frog, people say that if you drop a frog in a cold water and then gradually heat that up, the frog would die not knowing that it is being boiled to death. Someone told me, a scientist told me, that's actually not the case. He said that the frog doesn't even have the neurotransmitter that transmitted to the brain that the body is burning. It just doesn't have it. I think for the Ethiopian Prime Minister is something like that. He is so focused on being a Prime Minister, not doing the job of a Prime Minister. He doesn't ask those questions. He doesn't ask what is the constitutional role of the Prime Minister. He doesn't ask those questions. He wanted to be the Prime Minister. Being is his goal, and he will do anything, he will say anything to remain in office. That's otherwise, somebody who asks questions about why do I want to be Prime Minister of Ethiopia? What do I want to do with the power that I have? Not simply transforming Ethiopia, that's the word. That is simply a word. Not transforming Ethiopia or wishing to transform Ethiopia, but exactly within the realistic realm of what I want to do. He should ask himself. That's not the way he has behaved for the last 5 years. The Constitution doesn't matter to him. He has simply shredded it to pieces. The law, he thinks that is wrong. The bureaucracy, he says that is holding up projects. Yeah, this is my friend who told me that you're unfair to animals liking into an animal because animals don't kill their type. So yeah, I did apologize to animals for that. And by the way, I just wanted to say this, and I'll stop. This thing what we called about myth and reality. I studied anthropology in college. So we have myth in anthropology. Myth means a sacred truth, something that is specially true because a lot of people believe it. For instance, the Ark of the Covenant in St. Mary's Church in Tigray, we know the story of it, right? But a lot of people believe it. They hold it as a sacred truth. And for them, it is even more true. It's especially true. That is what we call myth. I think we are being unfair to the word myth by trying to say what is in Ethiopia is the myth. It's not. It's what I said earlier, because myth is really a sacred truth that is especially true um, um, because a lot of people really earnestly believe in it.
Getachew, if I interject with due respect to Duke,
Yes.
I think who is the audience? I believe this misrepresentation of facts and is more than Abiy. He is the producer, he is the generator, but he has audience and entourage. Ethiopia from the Derg days up to now depends on trained cadres that control the state, and they are in every place in the country. Mengistu had it, EPRDF in its time had it. They are empowered. They control the media, they control everything, they control the livelihood of people who get some sort of jobs and salaries and what have you. So those are the people who really nod and shake their heads when Abiy spells these things out. And they are not smart. And he has a clientele in every region, the Shimalises, the Mustafas, the Amara president, all those in addition to the large group of elite. And you have to understand that 5 years ago, Abiy was seen by some Ethiopians as a demigod, and that has not exhausted yet. That well of supporters, dependents, well-wishers are still, probably more than half of what it was. He also plays the ethnic card whenever things are tough. You can see every time the political powers and groups rearranged themselves depending on Abiy's propaganda and promotion of his myth. So when he says this thing, he is feeding to a political class that supports him, that also go to their regions and home districts, who also reverberate the same thing that he says. I think he has won and pushed that agenda and gained some audience, and I would not just consider this thing as he is the originator, he is the creator, but I think it has soldiers, foot soldiers that carry, and he intentionally, and he knows I remember Farrakhan calling Hitler a great vicious person. I think Abiy is a vicious manipulator and a person who knows what he's doing, as Kiel said, but he is doing not only for him, but for his audience. And I submit to you that his audience is huge. May not be 100% of the Ethiopian people, may not even be 80%, may not even be 40%. But given the elite group that he caters to, this is large. Imagine North Korea. I mean, people would be dying left and right. But the media would be telling the Korean people that they are the strongest nation, and there is an audience, captive audience, so as to speak. So I think Abiy has captive audience that run the smack in every region, in every part of Ethiopia.
So there is a demand and he's supplying, right? Okay,
Yep.
Thank you, Faisal. Duke, on the same question, you can reflect on, on what has been said, as well as on connecting it to other experiences as well. So, because I purposely showed that video from June 2018, and it's not like, an isolated incident. You can talk about the Somaliland, port MOU. The way it was reported is like breaking news. Ethiopia now has access to the Red Sea. Not even access, I think port, that's how it was reported. So it seems to work, like Faisal was, mentioning. So what do you say, Duke?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with Faisal. I agree with Tesco. I think that that his audience is probably the people who are still on board. Anybody who's still on board who hasn't been disillusioned by everything that's happened in the past 3 years, 4 years, maybe 5 years. Anybody who hasn't been disillusioned by what he's done in Ethiopia still needs him to come out and do his routine. I mean, we had a little bit of that going on in the United States as well. I don't know if you're familiar with our previous president, but this is something that it works for the diehard believers. It works for the people who are just ready to support the Prosperity Party, or ready to support, whatever comes out of Abi's mouth. It works for them. It works for some of the diaspora, that if there is a contingency left that's still supporting Abiy, I haven't met them in a while, but if there is still a contingency left, it works for them. It upsets the people who are already upset. The people who got upset when he said that we're self-sufficient in food are people who already know that they're not. So he loses very little as far as his popularity and his personal popularity, and I don't think he's expected to tell the truth. Anybody who opposes, I don't think there's anybody who opposes his political agenda who thinks, yeah, but he's a straight shooter or anything like that. I mean, maybe there are, but I don't see a whole lot of that. And why is he doing that? I think, I mean, there is everything that's been said so far. I mean, to keep his dying show on the road, you have to, I mean, if you came in through the BS door, you have to keep going down that hallway. There's no way for him to just turn around and say, all right, I'm going to be straight with you guys. I don't expect that to happen. So I think that he's put himself on this trajectory, and as far as motives go, I also think that he wants to sell more food. I think that he wants to sell more grain right out from underneath the noses of people who need it badly. I think he wants to sell it. I think that he needs money. I think that he needs cash. I think that things are starting to fall apart. And so you're going to see all of this BS coming out, because I mean, this is just how his show stays afloat. This is how he keeps going. He can't turn around and be honest right now about what happened in Tigray, about what happened in Oromia, about what was happening in Somalia. He can't turn around and be honest at this point, because he's blundered too many times. But I mean, this is just what we've expected. I think it's what people expect, and I think he comes out, he does this thing about self-sufficiency, or everything's great, or the greatest economic boom in the world. I think that he comes out, he does his greatest hits, and then he goes back to his several billion-dollar palace that he says is financed with his own money or with somebody else's money. I don't know, but that money should have been spent feeding the people of Ethiopia. And it's just it is deadly. I mean, it is something that it's killing people, because he creates a shroud over the people who are starving to death in displacement camps in the same region, in the same district that he's talking about. Displacement camps where children are starving. He puts a curtain over them with this nonsense about self-sufficiency. So not only is he not doing anything to stop the starvation of the people who are dying, he's actually preventing anybody else from doing anything about it. And that's the real, I mean, that's what is very egregious about this to me, is that it's like, calling the fire department and saying there's no fire here, when you should be getting the people out of the building. But not only are you not doing that, you're also telling people, no, there's no fire here, don't worry about it, don't come by. Because I don't think he wants humanitarian assistance anymore. I don't think he understands what happens if humanitarian assistance completely collapses, outside assistance completely collapses. I don't think he sees what's going to happen if that takes place. I think he wants money in a lot of other areas. And I think the US and the EU and the donor countries, large donor countries, I think they also would rather see money going into, cyber, linking up all the schools to the internet, or one of those really, sexy projects that they love to trot out. I think they want to be looking at, how we can use AI to do famine prevention. And I don't think they want to see more trucks go in full of food to people who need it. But the reality is if you're starving, you need food. You just need food. It's not hard. It's not incredible to give people food when they're starving. And that's what has to happen right now. But I don't think that's on anybody's agenda, because I could tell you how many people in Oromia were malnourished right now, but the last food assessment, the last nutritional assessment that they released is a year old now. So I don't know anymore. Nobody knows anymore. I mean, that's the thing, is that they've created this vacuum that he's been able to fill with this information. and then they turn around and they want to point fingers at everybody else. And it's, I mean, this is something I don't think it's a conspiracy. I don't think these guys all came together to decide to do this. But I think everybody's playing on the fact that between the Abiy administration and senior leadership of the UN, there's nobody who really cares how many people are starving. The only people who care are the people who are starving. Anybody who has a heart, who wants to see people eat, and their relatives, those are the people who care. But the people who are making decisions, they don't care, and it's disheartening to see it, to say the least.
Thank you, Duke. One thing before we go to the final thoughts, I think you reminded me of a U.S. report that's not made public yet, but was reported in Riyadh media, where when Abiy said we'll export wheat, and one of the things that happened, and that also make the suffering of people in Tigray and elsewhere, even worse, is his military started diverting aid wheat, repacking it in two ways. One, repacking it to the military, and repacking it and mailing it to export. So when the U.S. discovered this, what Abiy told them is, if you make this report public, I will kick out USAID and everyone from this country. So he is holding the people, the starving people, hostage of like you were saying, not only he's not helping, he is hindering from others to do their job and so on. So I hope there will be some way they can leverage on. So gentlemen, I mean, this is an interesting discussion, and we could just discuss all day long. But let's go to the final thoughts. Let's get the final thoughts for the day.
Final thought. I just wanted to say something about why engage in this kind of misrepresentation. I mean, misrepresentation and all that. Why is it? And I agree with Faisal. He is the generator, but he also has his purveyors. Definitely. And that's what I said at the beginning when I said the generals, who otherwise should be leading with facts, they also started to follow the guideline given by the communications officer of the prime minister. They were just talking about something that did not happen, and they know it. Of course, they are part of it, and they know it. They know even better than anybody else, because they are the ones that are engaged in the conflict in Oromia and Amhara. They know it. So of course they're a part of a system. But why is he doing that? Now, I don't want to make it a little too academic on this one, but I have two theories. The first one is people who depend to acquire power, to sustain power, and to exercise power. Their methods, the basis, the source of their power on charisma. They have to they depend on the initial appeal. That is the sign that you do something extraordinary. That is what Max Weber said about legitimate authority and charisma. That the success of a charismatic leader whose source of power and the basis of power and the methods of exercising power is based on that initial appeal. Like, for instance, there is a prophet. If a prophet prophesies and that prophecy comes to pass, the person gets followers. But they have to continue to prophesy to maintain that office. They cannot stop doing their job because they are a prophet. Abiy, he came to power and everybody was impressed because of his charisma. That's how he was described, a charismatic leader, unprecedented in Ethiopia, and he perpetuated it. And to this day, he perpetuates telling lies about, for instance, that he's the first Oromo. He is the first Oromo prime minister, which is absolutely not true. Or the first Oromo Ethiopian leader. Nagaso Gidada was president. Mulatu Tashama was president. Tasfai Dinka was prime minister. Mengistu Haile Mariam Gammachu Ayana was partly Oromo. It's just not true, but he says it. The first Oromo to be prime minister is not true. It's a lie, but they just say it and keep on saying it, keep on saying it. Because the mystic of a charismatic leader is the source of his power. It is the basis for maintaining power. When it doesn't work, he has to lie. When he doesn't have anything to deliver, he has to misrepresent. He has to do all of this. That is what charismatic leaders are. You know, even warrior charismatic leaders that Max Weber looked at, when they get to the limit of the territorial expansion, they come inward and routinize the charisma by building palaces, mosques, and cities. That's what the routinization of charisma is. But scholars have told us, like Michael Keeley said, beware of charisma. It's a genie out of the bottle. Or somebody else, the myth of charisma, who have told us that charisma does not mean anything. It cannot help us understand. So it has to be replaced by something else, because it could mean anything. It's conceptually, it could mean anything. It could be celebrity. It could be being on television a lot of times. So that is what it is. He is compelled. It's the myth of charisma that brought him to power, sustaining him in power. He has to keep producing that to sustain himself in power. The second is, I'm trying to write something, so I was reading about narcissistic leadership. This is not about narcissism. This is about narcissistic leadership. Some people who are narcissists could be successful. People who are mentally ill could become successful. Abraham Lincoln, Churchill, John F. Kennedy, all of them. But they ask questions about what they want. They ask questions. They adjust. They hypothesize. Then it's subjected to experiment. And if it doesn't work, they stop. But these the present crop of narcissistic leaders and their victims, they have victims, narcissistic leaders. They have a psychological structure that guides them. They create it, and the psychological structure guides them. Abiy has a psychological structure of the 3 levels. He has the worst one. It's called the disintegrated ego. If you are healthy, you want to satisfy the things that you want, image and power, by doing something substantive for the society that you lead. That is the healthy one. There is the average level. The average level of ego, which does embellish and do things, but they're not of significance, but they could still stay. Yeah. Now, the third one is the disintegrated ego. Has to lie, has to manufacture, has to misrepresent, or do all kinds of things in order to maintain themselves in power. Because they're narcissistic leaders, but they are sickly. They're not healthy. The disintegrated ego is what is leading them. So my view is, my view on this is, and this will be my closing word, that he also needs to be helped in this respect, because it's not him. It is the psychological structure that he created that is driving him.
Thank you, Faisal. Final thoughts,
Yeah,
please.
I would be brief. I gotta run. I have another engagement. So I think we talked about the challenges Ethiopia is facing in terms of feeding its people, and I think the last region that had to suffer starvation is Oromia. I think I remember Ed Keller of UCLA did an excellent research early in EPRDF era. Within the federal structure, what region is subsidized themselves versus those that are subsidized, and I think Oromia was number 1, probably the only state within the federal system that was self-sufficient, that really could meet its budget and its economic needs, versus other regions like Afar, Somalis, who were subsidized by other regions. And so for Oromia is the last region in Ethiopia to break its back. the rest were already broken a long time ago, and things are getting bad. I think there is also an international aspect of Prime Minister Abiy's danger, and that is his grandiose of the 120 million of Ethiopians by hook or crook grabbing land that does not belong to Ethiopia, and his audacity without any diplomatic restraint to undermine sovereignty and territorial integrity of other regions in the area, including Eritrea, Djibouti, and Somalia, are really the danger that's looming large in the region, especially for him not to recognize how volatile this region is. I've been reading recently the Amharic version of the grand strategy of Ethiopia to the two waters, which is a document that I've received from an Ethiopian friend. And when you read that, you would know that unless somebody stops Ethiopia, it could destabilize as far as Kenya. This entitlement, this biblical belief that there was a time in history, even prior to the birth of Christ, that Ethiopia owned ports. Prior to Christ, not knowing that nation states were created very recently, and everything that you had when Christ was born, or when Muhammad was born, or when even the Ottoman Empire, disintegrated, for him to put a claim on this superficial mythical history that is produced for Ethiopia and make that the basis for 21st century contemporary diplomatic relations and politics, there is nothing more dangerous facing the region of the Horn of Africa than what Abiy is presenting, even more than Al-Shabaab. For those of us who know both pages of the Horn of Africa region, Al-Shabaab is less dangerous today to the Horn of Africa than what Abiy represents. And I think people need to translate that document into English language, because the government intentionally kept away from producing it in English, so that it can have a wider circulation. That is danger. On top of everything that we talked about, I think if he fails internally, and if all that narcissism that my colleague talked about doesn't work, and if all the misrepresentation is backfire, the last card for him is to be suicidal and disturb the entire region. He already did once when he tried to quote unquote destroy TPLF. That was the first phase of suicidal. I think the second phase of his suicidal would be either to hit Eritrea in unnecessary war, or to put himself in this situation, and then that could destabilize the region. And that's my fear more than anything. Thank you. I gotta jump off if you guys let me.
Thank you, Faisal. Yeah, have a good one, and see you next week.
Thank you.
Brooke, the final word of the final is yours.
Good. When we look at the myth and the reality that's being propagated by the Prosperity Party, or by Abiy, or by his operatives, or by the operatives of the state, that's one thing, is to have, as a politician, as a minister, there's going to be lies told. But the international community, the humanitarian agencies that are working in Ethiopia, they are not working for the government of Ethiopia. They should be beholden to the people of Ethiopia that they're trying to serve. And there are too many organizations right now that are creating space for these lies to take hold, for this nonsense to get spread around. The fact that the IOM is not looking at whether or not people have gotten food after food aid restarted. The World Food Program isn't tracking whether or not people are still in severe food insecurity. The nutrition cluster, I do not believe, has conducted another nutritional survey, but if they have, they're keeping it hidden. The fact that all of these agencies that are supposed to be doing these things to help the people of Ethiopia are refusing to say anything. That whole thing you were talking about where he said, we'll kick you out of the country if you say that the military is repackaging this stuff. That is a 35-year-old trick. They've been doing that since the imperial days. It's not the fact that if you're still falling for something after 30 years, then you want to fall for it. The fact that the United States, the United Nations, or whoever it was going to say, the fact that they're still have their hands in their pockets trying to figure out what to do, means that they're not taking this seriously. Or, of course, that they have junior level staffers making decisions that they shouldn't make, who don't have a very much experience in Ethiopia and really don't care to have much more experience in Ethiopia, and are just trying to get through to their next post. That's also something that happens. But you can't fall for the same spiel so many decades in a row. We have to be able to see this coming. All the agencies, the humanitarian agencies, need to do is do their job. Count how much food got out. The food cluster used to put out every month, every week, they used to put out their distribution. Now they have a dashboard that's supposed to do it. But in that dashboard, you can't see how many IDPs got food. You can see how many IDPs they plan to give food to. And you can see whether or not they hit their overall target of how many people in total that they wanted to give food to. But you cannot see whether or not the IDPs got missed or whether or not they actually got food. That's a new thing that they're doing. The nutrition cluster used to have a dashboard where you could see how many IDPs were admitted for severe acute malnutrition, how many children of displaced families. They have a new dashboard that now doesn't have that function anymore. That's the only one they're updating. They need to stop helping this happen, because for Abiy to do it is one thing. For the World Food Program not to care how many people have food, that's ridiculous. They shouldn't be in business. If it's time for them to be dismantled, if that's where they're at in Ethiopia, where they're supposed to be doing the most good there, if they can't do that anymore, then I don't understand why they exist, why they're getting money. But this is what's happening. There are millions of people in Oromia, in Somalia, in Tigray, but not just those places, in Sidama, in other places all over Ethiopia, that people who are displaced, people that have been cut off from the grid, from the humanitarian food distribution or nutrition distribution of shelter, clean water, all of these things, they've been cut off from that. And they have also been cut off from assessments, from data, from getting that information out to the public. And I know that in the United States or in Europe or in any of these donor countries, the public is not going to stand up and shout, no, we can't let this happen. But we would at least have an understanding of how many people are starving. And they're helping this narrative of bullshit that is being pushed by the government, by the administration. They're helping, giving that the fuel to burn itself out, and it's costing people's lives. It's costing people's lives today. And while Abiy may not see his job as to preserve the life of the people of Ethiopia, the World Food Program needs to see their job as to get food to the people of Ethiopia. That's what their job is. All of these agencies, they're put there for one reason. They're put there to do a certain thing for a certain people. And the last thing I'll say about this is that the displaced people that are going back into the southern zone without protection from Tigrayan fighters, that is another case of where we've let the nonsense of, hey, maybe the federal government wasn't in on the human rights abuses or the slaughter or the starvation or the forced starvation or the sexual violence that was happening in Tigray. Maybe the Amhara regional forces weren't a part of it. Maybe Fano wasn't a part of it. The fact that we know better, we know that they were a part of all of these things. But now these displaced families, households, are being forced to go back into the southern zone, their own land, without the protection of Tigrayan fighters. I think it's something that Mike Hammer was pushing for. I think it's something the State Department was pushing for. This happened right after his visit. But this is people's lives are on the line. We want to preserve whatever reputation or anything, but people's lives are on the line. They shouldn't have to risk their life to preserve a lie. They shouldn't have to starve to death to preserve a lie that we feel comfortable telling. So that's my final word. Thank you.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you, Skell, and Faisal has left us, but thank you, Faisal, as well, wherever you are now. And I hope to see you next week with yet another episode of the H panel here at UMD Media. Good night.
Good night.
Okay, our viewers, I just want to make a couple of announcements. We do as well a show in Tigrinya and Amharic. በትግርኛ ሰሉስ ምስ ወሃቢ ቃል ህወሓት ኣይተ ኣማኑኤል ኣሰፋ ንራኸበና 11 AM Eastern Time ኣማኑኤል ኣሰፋ ወሃቢ ቃል ህወሓት and በአማርኛ ከጥቂት ቀናት በኋላ ክፍል 2 በአቶ ልደቱ ሰነድ ላይ የጀመርነው ውይይት ከአቶ ዳድ ደስታ ከአቶ መስፍን ዘለቀ እንዲሁም ከአቶ አያና ፈይሳ ጋር ያደረግነውን ክፍል 1 ትናንት አስተላልፈናል። ክፍል 2 ሰሞኑን እንቀጥላለን። Please subscribe, share, like, and hope to see you in upcoming shows. Good night, good day.